You live back now to City Hall for an update on the winter storm response. Mayor John Tory is speaking. Let's listen in live.
Me and by Gord Tanner, who's the General Manager of Shelter Support and Housing Administration, who's available to answer questions on that aspect of our activities today. And I should just tell you, these two gentlemen have incredible, I get an opportunity to work with them on a daily basis, basically, and they have incredibly difficult jobs, which they carry out very well. I think most people out there understand that, that government does its very best, city government and other governments, and it's based on the hard work of public servants, and that these two people do their job in just an excellent manner. And that is why we're able to report to you today on all the activities that have been undertaken to keep the city moving and to protect those who are most vulnerable. The latest understanding we have from Environment and Climate Change Canada is while it's raining this morning, the rain is expected to turn to snow in the next few hours, perhaps as early as even 9 o'clock. And conditions are expected to get much worse this afternoon and this evening. We're here to provide an update on the city's snow clearing and salting operations across Toronto, and Mr. Tanner, of course, to answer any questions with respect to how we're trying to shelter our most vulnerable. I have been getting regular updates from city officials ahead of the storm, and we will continue, of course, to be updating each other, but also updating the public as we respond to the weather. I did have a pre-storm update yesterday, and there at the table, in effect, were representatives from Transportation Services, the 311 call center, Shelter Services, Emergency Operations Center, the TTC, and Toronto Hydro. So I think people can be assured that it's all hands on deck and that we're doing everything we can to deal with the ice and snow and to keep people safe. I want to reassure Torontonians right across the city that all of our contractors have all of the equipment necessary to salt the roads, to clear the snow, but weather being weather, the reality of the storm and when things actually happen impact when these operations start. For example, it is much less effective, bordering on completely ineffective, to salt while we are experiencing heavy rain, as has been the case overnight. And in fact, I was just told by Vince that to put the brine out at all, and I think most people would readily understand this, say last night, the brine that is normally pre-treating the roads would be a waste of money and a waste of time because it would have just washed away overnight. Similarly, for obvious practical reasons, we have an amount of actual snowfall which will trigger the plowing operations to begin, as Vince said yesterday, and I'm sure he will reiterate right after me. The crews are ready, but there's a time specified in the protocols adopted with respect to snow clearing for when those operations would actually begin. Also, I think people should be on notice with this storm, if it meets up to the expectations that have been created for it by the weather forecasters. The clearing of the snow, for a variety of reasons, people, again, I think will understand if they think about it a bit, will likely be a multi-day event. And that is not because there won't be passes made through the different neighborhoods and on the arterial streets right away when the minimum threshold is reached, but rather with the winds that are expected. For example, if the snow is light and the winds are as projected, the snow will blow back onto the streets and will require the plowing to be done again. And so obviously when one round finishes, the next one begins, and so that's why it can take longer than just one pass of people's homes or businesses. One thing that was done yesterday was the beginnings of the pre-positioning of equipment, as Vince will, I'm sure, will reference, so that salting, for example, can begin as soon as the right time arrives. And the same with tackling the snow when it arrives, as it's expected to do. So people will actually see equipment out at different intersections around the city so that the minute that time is reached, they can be deployed as opposed to having to start in the yards at that time. I should tell people that since I became mayor, the winter services budget has been expanded, so our budget now stands at $109 million. And I can just assure people that money is never a bar to us getting the job done for people. If the budget has to be overexpended, as it were, because we have huge or frequent storms, then we will spend the money necessary to clear the snow. And there are reserves that allow us to take account of that and to do what has to be done to clear the snow. There are, this year, more than 1,100 pieces of equipment at the ready for operations, and they've already been activated twice this season so far on a smaller basis, and they're activated now. We do have new contractors in place for this year and a new arrangement for contracting, which I think will ultimately end up in better service being delivered. We have new technology that's been deployed, such as even wider spread use of GPS equipment so that the management staff know where the trucks and vehicles are at all points in time. And while there were some shortcomings with last week's much smaller storm event, particularly in a place like North Scarborough, that has given us an opportunity to learn from those instances and to take steps to address that. In fact, the reason we're doing this update here and not at a transportation services facility is because those yards are so busy with equipment coming in and out. It's just disruptive for us to update the public from there as opposed to here at City Hall. As Torontonians, we will see through the weekend and in the coming months, staff will continue to make sure that we deliver this important service to all parts of the city, from roads and highways to transit routes, sidewalks, bike lanes, and many park walkways. And they're done by a variety of different people, but the bottom line is it's our job to make sure that all of those parts of the city infrastructure are addressed. Yesterday, my office did intervene to ensure that warming centres would open last night ahead of the storm. I should report to you that as of 4 o'clock this morning, occupancy was 2 out of 17 spaces at the Scarborough Civic Centre. Metro Hall had 30 of 45 spaces occupied, and Mitchell Field, a community centre, had 2 of 50 spaces occupied. These warming spaces will, of course, remain open during the course of the storm, and there's been a cold weather alert issued by the Medical Officer of Health, and so the warming centres will remain open, and there is the flexibility to add more spaces if necessary, depending on, again, the actual occupancy. All of these things are part of the nuts and bolts services that people rely on, and we're working to make sure that we provide those services, and this includes the great team at Toronto Hydro. They have crews on standby for the holiday weekend, with wind, of course, being their main concern, and we would remind people, again, as they would, to please exercise caution if there are downed high hydro wires in the vicinity of your home or anywhere you're out and about. The advice from the hydro people and the safety people is that you should maintain at least kind of 1 bus length of a distance from any wire that you see. Please don't go near those wires, and make sure they know through 311 or otherwise that wire is in need of repair. We can't control the weather, but we can make sure that we deal with it as best we possibly can. This also includes the TTC. They will continue to be ready and make changes necessary to help Torontonians keep moving. This includes parallel bus service to account for the likely snow closure of the SRT in Scarborough. It does unfortunately include, of necessity, the closure of some 41 bus stops where buses would have trouble with the steep hills, and so it makes sense to close those bus stops, and it includes, for example, the storage of subway trains, which has been done in tunnels so as to avoid them becoming bogged down with cold temperatures or with ice. As well, people should know that in an effort again to keep the city moving, the TTC has de-iced and put de-icing fluid on all of the streetcar wires to help keep those streetcars running. So I encourage Torontonians to watch for updates from Environment Canada and to please be safe out there. The best thing probably that you can do over the next day or 2 or 3 is to stay home. And I think a lot of people probably have plans to stay home anyway, but I think if they stayed home, it makes it easier for you to stay safe, but also it makes it easier for us to do the things we have to do to clear the snow. If you do have to travel to work or to celebrations with loved ones through the weekend, this is among the first times people will have had a winter driving experience this year, and I think we all know that there are many things we all learned, but we also seem to temporarily forget them each year when winter comes, and so people should remember about winter driving. And of course, the number one rule with winter driving is to slow down, and I hope people will be safe in that regard. One other thing that people may not think about, and I know a lot of people don't have an alternative, but if you can avoid on-street parking, especially on the arterial roads, but also on residential streets, even where you have permitted parking, if there's another place you could put your car, this is helpful to the snow clearing operations, I think, for reasons most people understand. I would just like to conclude before asking Vince to say a few words by saying thank you to all the city workers and the contract workers who are on the job today, and of course they will be on the job on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and whatever day it has to be to get this job done. And so they have families too, and they celebrate different holidays at this time of year, and just like to have the kind of break when it's a bit quieter that we all like, but they'll be working, and they'll be working on our behalf, and I just want to say thank you to them for that. They are helping us to deal with these kinds of storms as well as they can, and I thank their families as well, I'm sure, on your behalf. And I want to just, of course, close, and we'll have a chance, I'm sure, to speak to you over the next day or 2, unless we get lucky and it's one of those storms that somehow miraculously diverts itself somewhere else, to say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody out there, but also in particular to the people who are helping us day in and day out in the shelters, on the TTC, looking after the snow clearing vehicles and so on. And so with that, I will ask Vince if he would come forward and give us an update, and then all 3 of us will be available to answer your questions.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to provide an update on our preparedness for winter maintenance services. So as the Mayor referenced, at the moment, we do have equipment that are stored and parked at various strategic locations across the city so that they will be able to be activated sooner. This is specifically for the expressways and for the arterial and collector roads. So those are areas where there is capacity, where we have these rather large pieces of equipment that could be stored without being a hazard or a risk for any other users in that area. So we have that currently deployed across the city. They've been there since early this morning, and they're literally waiting for us to call them out. Having said that, for the local roads and the sidewalks, recognizing that there could be some flash freezes and some very icy conditions, we will be also activating all the equipment for the local road salting and for local roads plowing when we reach the threshold of 8 centimeters. For sidewalks, we will also be activating all the equipment to begin salting. Normally, we would activate the sidewalk machines at 2 centimeters of accumulation, but recognizing that with the flash freeze and the temperature fluctuating so quickly, we will be salting the sidewalks as soon as the weather starts to change. And we will also be doing the same for all of the bicycle lanes and for all of our multi-use trails. So as the Mayor referenced, we do have staff available for each piece of equipment right now. So as of today, all of my contractors have confirmed to me that there is staff available for all equipment so that when we make the call, they will be ready to go. Having said that, this is going to be a multi-day, multi-round event. If we do receive the anticipated accumulations of possibly 10 to 15 centimeters, we're looking at multiple rounds or multiple passes in order to make the roads safe and passable. And that's our objective. Our objective is to ensure that the infrastructure, whether it be a road, bicycle lane, or a sidewalk, is safe for all users. And that will take multiple rounds. So we anticipate that this will continue into next week. The vast majority of the work happening today, tomorrow, and into Sunday, but recognizing that there's always areas of cleanup. One other service I also just want to reiterate is that we will also be doing all the driveway openings. So we do clear the driveway openings, but we do so when we plow the local roads. So there's a threshold of 8 centimeters for local road plowing. When that is activated, the equipment to clear the driveway openings are also activated. So we anticipate that we will get 8 centimeters of snow across the city. We usually get those in the northern parts of the city, Scarborough, North York, and the northern parts of Etobicoke. And if we do so, then we will be clearing the driveway windrows. So we have all our staff working today, tomorrow, and throughout the weekends, ready to be prepared. I myself will be in constant communications with the Office of Emergency Management throughout this event, and we'll be prepared also to further communicate to our residents about the event. Having said that, I would like to ask all our residents to be neighborly, and if they can, please avoid parking on the major arterial roads. It'll allow the equipment to pass through those roads to get the job done sooner and safely. So if you can, please avoid parking on the major arterial roads. We also ask that if you do see the equipment, please stay back at least 10 to 20 meters. Allow the equipment to do its job to make the infrastructure, the roads, the bicycle lanes, the sidewalks, the trails safe for everyone. So unless there's any other questions, I'll turn it back to the Mayor.
And we've been listening to the city's plan for the impending weather. Keep in mind, again, the big thing, there has been no pre-treatment of roads and sidewalks because of the rain. Keep that in mind as the weather begins to change.